The letter trembled in Elias Carter's hands, its edges worn from years of being unfolded and read in secret. "We regret to inform you that your application to serve has been denied due to violations of military conduct policy." 22 years later, those words still burned, a scar on his heart from a country he'd loved enough to fight for. Elias, now 45, stood in the dim light of his Portland, Oregon, apartment, staring at the faded paper. The world had changed since 2003, laws had shifted, minds had opened, but the rejection still clung to him like damp fog. He'd been 23, fresh out of college, dreaming of honor and service, only to be told his love for another man made him unfit. The memory of that day, the recruiter's cold dismissal, and the shame that followed haunted him. Yet tonight, something stirred, a spark of defiance that had been buried for decades. The city outside buzzed with life. Portland's streets, lined with quirky cafes and rainbow flags, felt like a different universe from the rigid military offices of his youth. Elias set the letter down and glanced at his phone. A text from Julian Torres, his partner of 2 years, lit up the screen. "Meet me at Laurelhurst Park. Got something to show you." Julian, 32, was a whirlwind of energy. Vibrant, unapologetic, with a laugh that could melt the iciest doubts. They'd met at a local bookstore, bonding over dog-eared poetry collections, and Elias had been smitten ever since. He grabbed his jacket and stepped into the crisp autumn air. The park was a short walk, its paths winding through towering oaks and maples, their leaves painting the ground in fiery hues. Julian sat on a bench near the pond, his dark hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Beside him was a small wooden box, intricately carved, and a notebook Elias didn't recognize. "Eli," Julian called, his voice warm but tinged with mischief. "You're late. Thought you'd stood me up." "Never," Elias replied, settling beside him. Their shoulders brushed, a quiet intimacy that still felt like a miracle after years of hiding. "What's this about?" Julian's eyes gleamed. "I found something. Well, I dug for something." He opened the notebook, revealing pages of handwritten notes, newspaper clippings, and printed emails. "You told me about the army, about what they did to you. I started researching. Did you know they repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell in 2011? And there's more. People like you, rejected back then, are starting to get apologies. Official ones." Elias froze. He'd buried that chapter of his life, locked it away with the letter he couldn't throw out. "Julian, I don't want to dig up the past. It's done." "But it's not," Julian insisted, his voice soft but firm. "You were wronged, Eli. You wanted to serve, to protect. They took that from you because of who you are. Don't you want justice?" Justice. The word felt foreign, like a language Elias had forgotten. He looked at Julian, whose brown eyes held a fire that both scared and anchored him. Julian had grown up in a different world, one where he could march in pride parades without fear, where his queerness was a badge of honor, not a secret. Elias envied that freedom but feared its cost. What would it mean to confront the past now, after all these years? "I don't know if I can," Elias admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's the point? It won't change anything." Julian reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. "It might change you, and maybe others too. I found a lawyer, Serengwin, who's been helping veterans like you. She thinks you could petition for an honorable recognition, maybe even a medal for what you were denied. But it's your call." Elias stared at the pond, its surface rippling under the evening breeze. The idea of fighting back, of demanding the army acknowledge its mistake, was terrifying. He'd spent years building a quiet life as a high school history teacher, finding solace in books and routine. But Julian's words stirred something. A longing to reclaim the man he'd been before rejection broke him. That night, back in his apartment, Elias couldn't sleep. He pulled out the letter again, its words blurring through unshed tears. He thought of his younger self, full of hope, and the years he'd spent hiding his truth. Then he thought of Julian, fearless and fierce, who believed in a world where love could rewrite wrongs. By dawn, Elias made a decision. He'd meet Sarah and Gwen. He'd fight. The law office in downtown Portland was a sleek contrast to the city's eclectic vibe: glass walls, modern art, and the faint hum of ambition. Sarah and Gwen, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s, greeted Elias with a firm handshake. Her desk was cluttered with case files, but her focus was laser-sharp. "Your case isn't unique, Elias," she said, sliding a folder toward him. "Hundreds of service members were discharged or denied under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But the Department of Defense has been issuing apologies and, in some cases, retroactive honors. Your rejection letter is proof they discriminated. We can build a case for recognition, maybe even a formal ceremony." Elias's throat tightened. "A ceremony? I don't know if I want that. I just want them to admit they were wrong." Sarah nodded, her expression softening. "I get it, but think bigger. This isn't just about you. It's about every kid who's ever been told they're not enough because of who they love. You could set a precedent." Her words hit hard. Elias had spent years teaching kids about courage, about standing up to injustice in history books. Now he was being asked to live it. He glanced at Julian, who'd insisted on coming along. Julian gave him a small, encouraging nod, his presence a steady anchor. "I'll need time to think," Elias said finally. "This is a lot." "Take all the time you need," Sarah replied. "But don't wait too long. The Pentagon's reviewing cases like yours now. There's momentum." Back at Laurelhurst Park that evening, Elias and Julian walked in silence, the weight of the decision pressing down. Julian broke the quiet first. "You're scared, aren't you?" "Terrified," Elias admitted. "What if I do this and it's just nothing? Another rejection?" Julian stopped, turning to face him. "Then we fight again, together. You're not that kid anymore, Eli. You're stronger than you know." Elias looked into Julian's eyes, seeing not just love but belief. A belief that Elias could be more than his past. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of courage, fragile but real. Over the next few weeks, Elias dove into the process. He and Sarah gathered documents, his college transcripts, character references, even old photos of him in ROTC, proud and eager. Each step felt like peeling back layers of shame, exposing wounds he'd ignored for decades. Julian was there through it all, reading drafts of petitions, cracking jokes to lighten the mood, and holding Elias when the memories became too heavy. One night, as they sat on Elias's couch, Julian pulled out the wooden box from the park. "I was saving this," he said, opening it to reveal a small silver pin shaped like a star. "It's not official, but I had it made. For you. For the soldier you always were." Elias's eyes stung as he took the pin, its weight grounding him. "You're ridiculous," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Ridiculously in love," Julian shot back, grinning. The petition process was grueling, a maze of bureaucracy that tested Elias's resolve. Every form, every affidavit, felt like a confrontation with the past. He'd sit at his kitchen table, surrounded by papers, while Julian brewed coffee and offered quiet encouragement. Sarah Gwynn was relentless, her emails a steady drumbeat of updates. The Pentagon's reviewing your case. We've got a hearing scheduled. Elias wasn't sure if he felt hope or dread, or both. The hearing was set for a crisp November morning in Washington, D.C. Elias and Julian flew out together, the plane's hum a backdrop to Elias's racing thoughts. He hadn't been to D.C. since a college trip, back when he'd dreamed of serving in the shadow of monuments. Now, at 45, he was returning to demand the honor he'd been denied. Julian, sensing his nerves, squeezed his hand during takeoff. "You've got this," he whispered. "And I've got you." The hearing room was sterile, all polished wood and flickering fluorescent lights. Elias faced a panel of 3 military officials. 2 men and a woman, their uniforms crisp, their faces unreadable. Sarah stood beside him, her briefcase stuffed with evidence. Elias's heart pounded as he recounted his story. The application in 2003, the recruiter's blunt rejection, the years of silence that followed. His voice wavered but held, fueled by the memory of Julian's star pin tucked in his pocket. One official, Colonel Margaret Hayes, leaned forward, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "Mr. Carter, why pursue this now? After all these years?" Elias hesitated, then spoke from the heart. "Because I'm tired of carrying the shame. I wanted to serve my country. I still do. And I want the truth to matter." The room fell silent. Sarah presented the evidence, letters, records, testimonials from colleagues who'd seen Elias's dedication as a teacher. Julian sat in the back, his presence a quiet strength. After 2 hours, the panel adjourned, promising a decision within weeks. Elias left the room feeling lighter, as if he'd shed a weight he hadn't known he was carrying. Back in their D.C. hotel, Julian pulled Elias into a hug. "You were incredible," he said, his voice muffled against Elias's shoulder. "No matter what they decide, you stood up." Elias smiled, but doubt lingered. What if the panel saw him as just another name on a file? What if this fight, like the first, ended in rejection? Weeks passed back in Portland, the waiting agonizing. Elias threw himself into teaching, finding solace in his students' debates about justice and history. One afternoon, a student, 16-year-old Maya, stayed after class. "Mr. Carter, you always talk about standing up for what's right. Did you ever have to do that?" Elias paused, then told her a version of his story, leaving out the details but sharing the pain of being told he wasn't enough. Maya listened, her eyes wide. "That's messed up," she said. "But you're still here. That's what counts, right?" Her words stayed with Elias, a reminder that his fight wasn't just for him. It was for kids like Maya, for Julian, for every person who'd been told their love was wrong. When Sarah's call finally came, Elias's hands shook as he answered. "They're granting you an honorable recognition," Sarah said, her voice bright with triumph. "And there's more. They want to hold a ceremony in D.C. to present you with a commendation for resilience." "Elias, this is huge." Elias sank onto his couch, stunned. Julian, who'd been eavesdropping, let out a whoop and tackled him in a hug. "I told you," he crowed. "You're a hero, Eli." But Elias wasn't ready to celebrate. The idea of a ceremony, public, official, with uniforms and speeches, felt overwhelming. He'd spent so long in the shadows, hiding who he was. Could he step into the light now? The ceremony was scheduled for spring, giving Elias months to prepare or to doubt. He and Julian flew back to D.C. in April, the city blooming with cherry blossoms. The event was small, held in a modest Pentagon conference room, but to Elias, it felt like a battlefield. He wore a simple suit, the star pin gleaming on his lapel. Julian sat in the front row, his smile a beacon. Colonel Hayes, who'd questioned him at the hearing, presented the commendation. Her speech was brief but powerful. Elias Carter, your courage in confronting injustice honors not only you but every service member who was denied their place. We were wrong. Today we begin to make it right. As she pinned the commendation to his jacket, Elias's throat tightened. The room applauded Sarah, Julian, a handful of veterans who'd fought similar battles. Elias looked at Julian, whose eyes shone with pride, and felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about the past. It was about the future. That night, at a quiet DC restaurant, Elias and Julian sat across from each other, the weight of the day settling around them. I didn't think I'd feel this whole, Elias admitted, his voice soft. All these years, I thought I'd lost something I could never get back. Julian reached for his hand. You didn't just get it back. You made it better. For you, for me, for anyone who comes after. Elias smiled, his heart full. The road had been long, but in this moment, with Julian's hand in his, he felt like he'd finally come home. The months after the ceremony were a whirlwind. Elias's story spread, first through local Portland news, then national outlets. A reporter from the Washington Post called, wanting to feature him in a series about veterans reclaiming their honor. Elias hesitated. He'd never sought the spotlight, but Julian and Sarah convinced him. This isn't just your story anymore, Sarah said. It's a beacon for others. The article, published in June, was titled The Soldier Who Never Gave Up. It detailed Elias's rejection, his fight, and the Pentagon's recognition. Comments flooded in, some cruel, but most heartfelt. Veterans reached out, sharing their own stories of rejection and resilience. Elias read every message, moved by the community he hadn't known existed. But fame came with shadows. Not everyone celebrated his victory. Online, anonymous trolls spewed venom, calling him a fraud, a disgrace. One email and signed, read, "You'll never be a real soldier." Elias tried to shrug it off, but the words echoed the recruiter's dismissal from 2003. Julian noticed the change in him, the way he grew quiet, the way his smiles faltered. One evening, as they walked through Portland's Pearl District, Julian stopped him. "Talk to me, Eli. You're pulling away." Elias sighed, his breath visible in the cool air. "It's just what if they're right? What if I'm chasing something I don't deserve?" Julian's jaw tightened. Deserve? You fought for this country in a way most people never will. You stood up when they tried to break you. Don't let some cowards behind a keyboard take that away. Elias nodded, but the doubt lingered. He threw himself into work, hoping routine would ground him. His students, unaware of the article at first, began to whisper. Maya, the student who'd asked about standing up, brought him a copy of the Post. "Mr. Carter, this is you," she said, eyes wide. "You're like, famous." Elias laughed, embarrassed. "Not famous, just stubborn." "No," Maya said firmly. "You're brave. We're learning about civil rights in class. You're like that, you know? Fighting for what's right." Her words hit deeper than Elias expected. He realized his fight wasn't just about him or even the veterans who'd reached out. It was about kids like Maya, who'd grow up in a world shaped by battles like his. He started speaking at local schools, sharing his story, not as a hero, but as a man who'd learned to stand tall. Meanwhile, Sarah had bigger plans. "There's a National Veterans Conference in Chicago next month," she told Elias over coffee. "They want you to speak. Keynotes, big stage. You could inspire thousands." Elias's stomach churned. A classroom was one thing, a conference was another. "I'm not a speaker, Sarah. I'm just a teacher. You're more than that, she said. You're proof that change is possible. Say yes, Elias. For them. Them. The veterans, the kids, the people still hiding their truth. Elias thought of Julian, who'd never wavered, and agreed. The weeks leading up to the conference were a blur of preparation. Julian helped him write the speech, their evenings filled with laughter and revisions. You're gonna kill it, Julian said, kissing his forehead. And I'll be in the front row, cheering like a fool. The Chicago conference was held in a sprawling convention center, its halls buzzing with veterans, activists, and policymakers. Elias stood backstage, his palms sweaty, the star pin heavy in his pocket. Julian squeezed his hand before taking his seat, his grin a lifeline. When Elias stepped onto the stage, the spotlight felt like a weight. Hundreds of faces stared up at him, some curious, some skeptical. He cleared his throat and began. I was 23 when the Army told me I wasn't good enough, he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. Not because I couldn't fight or serve, but because I loved a man. For years I believed them. I believed I was less. The room was silent, hanging on his words. Elias told his story, the rejection, the shame, the fight for recognition. He spoke of Julian, of Sarah, of the students who'd reminded him why this mattered. This isn't just about me, he said. It's about every person who's been told their love makes them unworthy. We're not unworthy. We're unstoppable. The applause was deafening. Elias's knees shook as he left the stage, but Julian was there, pulling him into a hug. You did it, Julian whispered. You changed the room. That night, as they walked along Lake Michigan, the city lights glittering, Elias felt a peace he hadn't known in years. The fight wasn't over. There were still battles, still voices calling him unworthy, but he was no longer alone. Julian's hand in his was proof of that. Back in Portland, Elias's life took on a new rhythm. The conference had sparked something, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since his ROTC days. He started a small nonprofit with Sarah's help, called Honor Restored, to support veterans seeking recognition after discriminatory discharges. The work was exhausting but fulfilling, each email from a veteran a reminder of why he'd fought. Julian was his rock, but their relationship wasn't without strain. The spotlight on Elias meant more time apart. Speaking engagements, late-night meetings, endless paperwork. Julian, a graphic designer, was patient, but Elias saw the flicker of loneliness in his eyes. One night, after a long day, Elias found Julian sketching at their kitchen table, his brow furrowed. You okay? Elias asked, sitting beside him. Julian set down his pencil. I'm proud of you, Eli. I am. But sometimes it feels like I'm sharing you with the world. Elias's heart sank. He'd been so caught up in the cause, he hadn't seen the toll it was taking. I'm sorry, he said, reaching for Julian's hand. You're the reason I'm doing this. I need you to know that. Julian smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I know. Just don't forget me in all this. Okay? Elias pulled him close, vowing to balance his mission with the man he loved. They started carving out time. Sunday hikes, late-night movies, quiet moments that reminded them why they'd chosen each other. But the world kept pulling. A national LGBTQ plus advocacy group invited Elias to D.C. for a gala, honoring veterans who challenged discrimination. It was a chance to amplify Honor Restored, but it meant another trip, another weekend away. The gala was a glittering affair, all chandeliers and formal wear. Elias felt out of place in his rented tux, but Julian, dashing in a tailored suit, kept him grounded. During the event, Elias met a retired General Marcus Reed, who'd served during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Reed, a grizzled man in his 60s, pulled Elias aside. "Your story matters, Carter," Reed said. "I was part of that system. I enforced those rules. I regret it every day. Keep pushing. You're doing what I couldn't." Elias was stunned. Reed's words were a reminder that change rippled outward, touching even those who'd once upheld the old ways. He returned to Portland with renewed fire, but also a nagging fear. The bigger his platform grew, the more he risked losing the quiet life he'd built with Julian. Then came the letter. It arrived on a rainy October morning, sealed with a Pentagon crest. Elias's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was an invitation not just to another ceremony, but to re-enlist. The Army was offering him a chance to serve, not as a soldier, but as a civilian consultant on diversity and inclusion, helping shape policies for future generations. Elias sat frozen, the letter in his lap. Re-enlist. The word felt like a dream and a wound. He'd wanted this at 23, but now, at 45, with a life he loved, what did it mean? Julian found him staring at the letter, his face unreadable. "They want me back," Elias said, voice hollow. "Not to fight, but to fix things. From the inside." Julian's eyes widened. "That's incredible. But what do you want?" Elias didn't know. The Army had broken him once. Could he trust them now? And what would it mean for him and Julian, for their life together? They talked late into the night, weighing dreams against reality. Julian, ever the optimist, saw it as a chance to rewrite history. Elias saw it as a leap into the unknown. Elias spent weeks wrestling with the Pentagon's offer. The idea of stepping back into the institution that had rejected him was daunting, but the chance to shape its future was undeniable. He imagined a world where no one would face what he had, a world where love didn't disqualify honor. But he also imagined Julian, waiting for him through long days and longer nights. One evening, Elias took Julian back to Laurelhurst Park, to the bench where it all began. The air was crisp, the stars bright above the city. He carried the star pin in his pocket, a talisman of their journey. "I've decided," Elias said, his voice steady. "I'm going to take the offer, but only if you're with me." Julian's eyes softened. "I'm always with you, Eli, but this is big. Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Elias said. "Not because I need the Army's approval anymore, but because I want to make sure no one else feels what I felt. And I want you by my side, every step." Julian grinned, pulling Elias into a kiss. "Then let's do this. Together." Elias accepted the role, moving to D.C. with Julian in the spring of 2026. The job was challenging. Endless meetings, skeptical colleagues, policies that changed at a glacial pace. But Elias was relentless, drawing on the courage he'd found through his fight. He worked with veterans, policymakers, and recruits, ensuring the Army became a place where everyone could serve with pride. Honor Restored grew too, with chapters in 5 states. Elias and Julian balanced their new life, finding joy in small moments. A shared coffee in their tiny D.C. apartment, walks along the Potomac, stolen kisses between meetings. The trolls still came, but their voices were drowned out by the community Elias had helped build. On the 1-year anniversary of his re-enlistment, Elias stood before a group of new recruits, sharing his story. "You are enough," he told them. "Your love, your identity, your truth, they make you stronger, not less. Serve with pride." In the audience, Julian beamed, the star pin now a matching pair, one on his jacket, one on Elias's. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Elias had reclaimed his honor, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd been told they didn't belong. And in Julian's eyes, he saw the truth. Love didn't just rewrite history, it built a future.